It's really lovely to see you, Steffi. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak in this way about the TDSL experience. And how are you, first and foremost?
Really good, really good.
That's
Thank you.
lovely.
And I'm grateful as well to have been able to join the course. And so like all you've been doing during these 5 weeks has been very, very helpful there.
That's great news. That's really, really good news. You sent a little email the other day, which described a particular experience you had recently, and when I read that, I found it very moving. It was very moving because I understand from personal experience how much of a hard time us human beings can give ourselves for so many years. And then to realize that we don't need to do that anymore. It's quite a shocking experience sometimes.
It is, and I feel like even though sometimes we know already we don't need to do this, right? But then actually making the step to be able to not do it, to make that choice, to make that change, because often we know it and we somehow believe we do it or we try. And then when you actually see the changes happening and you're like, oh wow, I haven't been doing this, and how that feels, this change is just incredible.
Yes. So I think in many cases, people are fed up of feeling rubbish about themselves or giving themselves a hard time, but they don't really know what to do about it. They don't know how to change. We're not taught how to let go of dysfunctional patterns of self-communication.
Exactly.
We become attached to them, and we don't know what to do with that.
And first, usually, most of the time, it's that you're projecting it outwards, that you're perceiving that the harm is coming from the outside. And then there's a second step when you realize that actually your thoughts about yourself have been creating these pains and these unwishful situations. And then you come into another cycle where you realize that you're responsible, which can bring up a lot of guilt, but also a lot of power. And then to actually make that step or have the necessary tool to change your patterns you've been having, that's the key.
I believe so as well. For me personally, when I first started to study with Vernon, I had no idea what I was in for. I hadn't got a clue. I only did it because he asked me. I had no natural desire to become a therapist. I just was introduced to him, and he asked me a very blunt question one day: do I or do I not wish to study with him? And I had no idea what I was in for. But yeah, and up until studying with him, I had no idea how to change. I had no idea how I'd been responsible for giving myself a hard time for so long. I just thought that's what life has taught me. This is who I am. This is just the way things are.
Yeah, there is no perspective on it. There is like, it's not fun, but that's just how it is. And
yes.
And then seeing that you actually have a choice, and that you have the strength and power to change.
Yes.
That's like a completely new world that's opening up.
Yeah, absolutely. I've found this to be true as I've done this work with individuals over the last 15 years, and people have come to see me in all kinds of states of broken and lost. And when it's explained clearly to them, as Vernon explained it to me, and then with a little bit of guidance, I've seen people completely transform and let go of some very, very difficult patterns of self-reflected negativity, self-doubt, self-loathing, self-pity, all kinds of things. So what I'd like to do, Steffi, please, is we've prepared a number of questions.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna go through just a small bunch of questions about the dialogue of self-liberation and what your experience has been and is of this. So I'm just going to get this up on the screen now. I've got this all ready to go.
Just one thing before the questions, which probably could be more. I've been watching a video of Joe Rogan, and he applied this dialogue of self-liberation the way he speaks. So it was really interesting. There was this part where he was explaining his, like, the way he has been, and he actually corrected himself while speaking. And I was like, there's another one.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, that's in time, what we're going to be doing is reaching out to some of these influencers to hopefully develop some kind of lines of communication with them to discuss this with them, because this could really help a lot of people.
Oh, it definitely, yeah.
Wonderful. So, so what I'm going to do is we're going to, because I may edit this slightly, and maybe what we're about to do is start more of a formal interview on the subject matter. So, if we start from now, first of all, Steffi, could you introduce yourself, please?
Okay. I'm Steffi. I'm originally from Switzerland, and I've been living for the past 8 years in Cambodia. Right now I'm in India, but in Cambodia I met also Pete, and Pete introduced me to your program. Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Okay, so what we're going to be discussing here, I have a series of small questions here, or hopefully very thought-provoking questions, about the dialogue of self-liberation and what your experience has been and is of this method of transforming how we communicate toward ourselves, about ourselves. So the first question I have for you, Steffi, is what kind of challenges were you facing before being introduced to the dialogue of self-liberation? And obviously you don't need to go into any particular details that you might not be comfortable with, but as a general description, what kind of challenges had you been facing before encountering the dialogue of self-liberation as a methodology?
For me personally, like, I have been observing myself and my thoughts for a while, and I've seen the limitations I've been putting on myself, but I never knew how to change them. Or I've believed that I've had like coachings or other tools which I've been going into, but never really actually a tool you can adapt. Like when you have these thoughts, and then you don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
And that was the biggest challenge for me, because I've seen my responsibility, but I didn't know what to do with it.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. So how would you describe your interest in learning the dialogue of self-liberation when I think it was Peter would have first mentioned this to you? What sparked your interest? How would you describe that?
Oh, I'm fascinated by being human. Like the way we humans are and the way we humans function, and that we have this amazing tool called brain up in our skull, and we actually have no idea how to use it. So it uses us. And for me, it is fascinating what we actually can do with it if we have the right tool. So when Pete mentioned that to me, I was like, oh yes, it's just getting deeper into that topic is something that really sparks my interest and makes me excited.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Next question. What has been your experience while learning the dialogue of self-liberation? So for instance, what did you first think as you were beginning to discover what the principle of the dialogue of self-liberation is all about? What was your experience of learning TDSL?
Through the whole course?
Yeah.
Yeah. When we started, I had this idea, this perception of the course being something with one tool we can work with. And during the course, there were more and more possibilities we got to work on and with our mind. So from all these different angles, we were able to get closer to it and learn from it. And so if one of the tools didn't or hasn't been resonating much, there was another tool which I could use. And that was really interesting, because often a lot of teachings, they have one fixed path. And what I've experienced with the dialogue of self-liberation is that there are different tools you can use. And even if you combine them together, you will have a more or a greater improvement. That's what I've been experiencing.
That's great. Thank you. How did you begin to apply TDSL in your life as you were beginning to study this? How did you first start to apply it?
So the first step was really observing the thoughts, and also being honest with myself, because when we start seeing what we're telling ourselves, it has been there that we try to ignore it, or because it's uncomfortable, and then actually stepping into the power and saying it's okay. These thoughts have been here, and I have to first acknowledge that they have been here, and then I can make the second step.
Yes.
And then I've been seeing more and more of those thoughts and allowing them to be there, and not blaming myself for them to be there. So it's like really from observation, allowing, and then going into change. That was the process during the course, which I've been experiencing.
Yes. What kind of challenges did you experience along the way as you were being introduced to the dialogue of self-liberation?
The biggest challenge, as always, has been self-blame. Like
self-blame.
Really,
yeah.
Because when I've been observing these thoughts, and then even I had the tool, or I saw them, that I've been still blaming myself for it. And that was the biggest challenge, actually, to change that.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a particular aspect to the dialogue of self-liberation as we progress through on the live program. By the way, this is what we're discussing, is Steffi having engaged in the dialogue of self-liberation live program, which is delivered as 5 separate dialogues, 5 separate chunks of information. And during that process, toward the latter part of the process, we begin to discuss the subject of the value of forgiveness. So you mentioned self-blame, blaming ourselves for maybe having made mistakes, or having been cruel to ourselves, or maybe toward other people, acting in certain ways that we would feel regret or ashamed of, maybe, or just really beating ourselves up for not getting certain things right, for not being good enough,
exactly.
Blaming ourselves. But forgiveness and self-compassion are really a major part of the development of the dialogue of self-liberation. How would you describe those particular qualities in the emphasis of the progression of the dialogue of self-liberation? How did you relate to those particular things, self-compassion and the value of forgiveness?
I've been seeing that before, but through the work we've been doing, I've come more and more to realize and to see that forgiveness or self-compassion, self-love is the, I would say, even the most crucial point. It's because it's like a cycle. And when we keep doing what we've been doing and nowhere we cut nowhere the cycle, then we will never break it. And by cutting the cycle, we have to see that we're human, that we have made mistakes and we probably will make mistakes. But that's where the key of forgiveness and self-compassion comes in, because that's how we can heal. That's the only way to actually change.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It is the key, really. I think in the
Otherwise,
world,
it just keeps on going.
it keeps on. Exactly. We have to break the loop, break the cycle.
Exactly. And breaking the cycle doesn't mean we're push, all is good. By breaking the cycle, we first have to experience forgiveness. We first have to experience being human, having that compassion for ourselves. And from that, it will change. We also have to have trust in ourselves or in the method we're using, because through that trust, through the forgiveness, we're actually making progress.
Yes. How easy was it for you to find that you could trust the information that we were presenting to you?
After the first dialogue already, that when what we've been doing after that first dialogue and the results I've seen within myself, or how it has been affecting my life, that was proof enough to trust in whatever is to come without knowing what is to come.
Yes. That's so right from the start. Yes.
Yeah, that was, it's like really test it out yourself. Like you've been saying, you don't need to believe, test it out, and that has worked.
Yeah, exactly. That's really great. So at what point did you realize, hey, wait a second, there's something valuable here? And how did you notice that?
It has been different things. Like I said, through seeing more and more of ways I've been talking to myself.
Yes.
But also the space you and Pete created during those sessions has been incredibly valuable. It's a safe space where that's, for me, it has been this way, where I've been feeling comfortable to share, ask any questions. There is no limit to be open.
Yes.
And you both have different aspects of looking at the dialogue of self-liberation, and yet it combines in such a beautiful way. So whatever question has been coming up within myself, I was able to ask it and have this safe space and answers to actually make the further steps.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So how has it been possible for you to apply this in your relationships with other people, in your communications with other people?
I've been becoming very aware of how I speak. Not all the time, but much more what kinds of words I'm using, how I'm speaking, and also how others speak about themselves.
Yes.
And that is one part of it. And another is I've been taking the responsibility of how I see the world to myself. And with that, also being able to give the responsibility of how others see the world to themselves, instead of keeping the idea that I've been having that maybe I'm responsible as well of how they feel. And that doesn't mean being rude and not caring. It just means like the moment I saw the power, choice, and responsibility I have, I'm also able to give that to someone else. And that's not only lightening my life, it's also empowering theirs.
Yes. Yeah. Leading by example.
Yeah, exactly.
Really. Yeah, rather than trying to tell other people how they should or shouldn't be communicating toward themselves. If we are prepared to transform ourselves and our own self communications, then we have the ability to lead by example. Particularly, I've noticed in people who've known me for many years, and the difference that it's been commented by some of my closest friends how I've changed over the years that they've known me as a direct result of studying with Vernon and acquiring the understanding of the principle of the dialogue of self-liberation and practicing it over years. It's completely transformed how I use words, how I communicate not only toward myself but toward other people as well.
So, yeah, because the way we communicate inside is the same way we communicate outside.
Yes.
There might be adaptations possible, but it's also a pattern, it's a habit we are creating, and the way we speak to ourselves is, if we speak not consciously or automatically, it comes out the same way to someone else.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you perceive excuse me, how do you perceive TDSL? What is it to you? How could you describe it in your own words, filtered through the lens of your own experience?
TDSL is a tool to see yourself, observe yourself, and take back your own power. I think it's pretty short, but that's it, because it's a beautiful, it's not connected to any religion, any other belief. It's just coming back to yourself, seeing how you're creating your own reality, and actually giving you a tool to change it.
And so what has it given you personally?
Freedom.
Wonderful.
It is an ongoing process. It's not
yes, it is.
magic, and it happens.
Yes.
But the moment you see what you're able to do when you're actually applying it, and you observe the consequences of that, that's freedom.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So really, in a certain way, one of the goals of developing the dialogue of self-liberation is to clear away the mental and emotional clutter that may have built up on the inside that's been obscuring the authentic self. How would you describe the experience of identifying that clutter through engaging in the dialogue of self-liberation, and having identified it, how easy has it been so far to let that go?
It's difficult to answer that question, because the way I've been experiencing it, it's layers upon layers.
Yes, it is.
And it's like an onion. Yeah. And so maybe the outer layers are like the same like an onion. The outer layers are much easier to peel, and the deeper you go, the more challenging those layers are to take off. And so it's an ongoing process, but it's also, I've been starting to have fun with it.
That's great.
Because through the idea and the act of forgiveness and self-compassion, the identification has been much less. So it's it's easier to bring a bit of fun and joy in it. And there are days also when it doesn't work, and that's fine as well. And that's also part of it.
Yes, it is. It is an ongoing process, isn't it? As we discuss in the live program, this is not about a goal which we're trying to attain or a thing which we're trying to acquire. It's an understanding of an ongoing process which makes sense to continue to engage in on a daily basis.
And it's like also with the different tools we got, or the different talks we had, we really you can inflame that joy, and then it isn't that hard anymore like it has been in the past.
With the live program, obviously it's a small group of individuals all working at the same time, engaging in that particular live program. What was your experience of the feeling of support and connectedness between yourself and the other participants on the live program?
I found that really interesting. I didn't know who to expect, what kind of people to expect. And even though we were a really small group, I found it very interesting how different we all were. And yet at the same time, that openness to share. Everyone has been really, really open in whatever felt comfortable for him or her. And it felt safe. And also through that, there were so many different, few different, but different perspectives that gave another way to look at things, and the beautiful opportunity to observe how many different perspectives there actually are. And for me, that was amazing.
It's interesting. I find it was extremely interesting doing the live program with yourself and the other participants, because everybody is so different, and yet there's the common shared theme, which is, if we are really honest with ourselves, chances are we've held ourselves back through unconsciously communicating in self-defeating or self-abusive ways or self-pitying ways, habitually, unconsciously over many years. We've all been, I think, the victim of a self-defeating internal communication, self-communication. It's a very, very common theme. People give themselves such a hard time unnecessarily, because they've been kind of conditioned to do so.
Yeah. And what you just mentioned brought up another point. The moment we share it and we see that those beliefs or those words we've been using towards ourselves is not just us, there are others out there. And that gives that sense of like, it might have been the case that you thought like, oh, this is only me. For me, that has been the case. I've thought that, oh, only me have been having those thoughts. And then you share it with other people and you're like, oh, we're all the same. So it and that's the beauty in it. And the more you allow yourself to be open with others, or that the possibility to share makes it, or has been making it, less real, less heavy, less separate during the times I've been on my own as well.
So at the times you've been on your own, since you've been developing the dialogue of self-liberation personally, have you found those times to be more comfortable, like being comfortable with more so in one's own company?
Absolutely. That's also the email I've sent you. And that, like I said, it's a process. It's not a magic wand and it changes overnight. But what I've been developing over this time is this certain kind of safety within, this home. I guess it's coming through the forgiveness part.
Yes.
Of whenever a thought has been coming up, there's a place to go to. There's a place to feel safe. And that for me has been very, very helpful.
That's really great. So lovely to hear. So what do you feel the difference is between now that you are working with the principle of the dialogue of self-liberation compared to before you began learning TDSL? What's the difference?
For me, a lot of difference lies in the language, the way I'm talking to myself. And even if I'm not always able to change it in the moment, I'm becoming more aware of it, and I've been using different words. So that was the biggest change for me personally.
Yes. The transformation of the actual way we would speak to ourselves or communicate toward ourselves in real time.
Exactly. And not only like in a conversation with someone else, mainly like inside and the awareness I've gained how often I've been doing this. And that, like, the layers again, then you're like, oh, I've seen that, and like there's more and more and more to it. It's this.
Yes.
It's a fascination that has been, my fascination for the human mind has been growing.
Yeah, you know, I've been doing this work with individuals for 15 years, 15 years or so now. And the more I've done so, the more fascinating the whole process has become, because I've seen how radically people have transformed their relationship toward themselves and toward other people in the process. And that's a wonderful thing to see. So it's been many years in the making, this live program, really. There's a thing that I mentioned on, I think, the last session. There's a saying that my martial art teacher learned from one of his teachers, that it takes 3 lifetimes to master an art. Well, that's the lifetime of your teacher or teachers, your own lifetime, and the lifetime of your students. So with respect to the dialogue of self-liberation, Vernon, my teacher, spent probably 50 or 60 years of his life developing the understanding of this. He taught it to me. It helped me incredibly so. And consequently, I've been working 15 years with people, passing on the understanding to individuals as a therapist working in London. And so then I spent 2 years teaching the methodology to Peter. So the 15 years plus another 2, 17 years plus, say, 60 years with Vernon. So there's considerable amount of years there in the making to the point where we met yourself and the other people on the first live programs. So how long is it since I first met you via the live program? It's not long at all, is it, really?
No, like that was beginning of what, like a month?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Maybe a
No, it
couple
must be more.
of
Yeah.
months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of months or so ago. And so in a relatively short space of time, compared to what your experience of your self-communications were prior to that, do you find, how do you find your relationship toward yourself has improved?
Really, the self-forgiving, and to where before I've been observing my mind for a while, for a few years. Like I said at the beginning, I struggled like with how to change it. I've seen that the responsibility I'm having, and then feeling frustrated with myself for not being able to change it. And that has been all in the past. And since the course, I've found, or you have given me a tool to change it. And in the process of changing those beliefs that have been very limiting, very painful. Also the tool of self-forgiveness, of basically we're human and it's a normal thing, and here is a tool and work with it. Yeah. It sounds really simple, but we never learn that. We grow up, minds get programmed unknowingly through ourselves, through our environment, and nobody ever tells us or gives us tools, helps how to be human, and that all those thoughts, that they're completely normal. And through the dialogue of self-liberation, I've been learning a tool to to operate this brain with while having a lot of forgiveness and self-compassion.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Can I ask you, please? You mentioned earlier that the dialogue of self-liberation is not in any way to do with anything religious. Could I ask you, based upon all of your prior studies and your own personal experience and the things that your own inner development work that you've been doing as an individual over the years, is there anything about the dialogue of self-liberation that has been in any way incompatible with anything that you've already understood? No. Or the experience you've already gained from studying any other method or way of perceiving life and your own relationship toward life?
No, not at all. On the contrary, it fits very well with whatever I've been looking into in the past, and it's not a hindrance or a limit or any like clash in beliefs, teaching systems I've had. So no.
I'm not quite sure about this. Please correct me if I'm not correct with this. Have you had an interest in Buddhism yourself?
Yes, I have interest in generally religions, and additionally Buddhism, but also Hinduism, especially since I'm in India.
Yes,
since almost half a year.
Yes, so. Yeah. So when we speak about certain qualities like compassion as a practice, ongoing research into how to be compassionate toward ourselves, and therefore if we can learn to be compassionate toward ourselves, then it can begin to radiate outwardly toward other people and toward life in general and the natural world around us more authentically, compassionately. How do you relate to what I just said there?
About the compassion?
Yes.
I believe that's the main key. The way I personally see it is, we've all been given this tool. We have this body with its mind, and we learn how to feed ourselves. And then nobody ever teaches us how to think for ourselves. And the core thing for every teaching, I believe, is that self-compassion that we're always learning. And I feel like I've been observing that a lot also with the kids here, or generally children. When we are kids, we learn. We just learn. We never blame ourselves. When we start walking, we fall, and that's just how it is. And there is not the concept of, oh, I'm learning, I make a mistake, I'm doing something wrong, I'm not enough, and the whole follow up of it all. And I believe to come back to a life of joy, to a life of freedom, it is self-compassion. When I have self-compassion for myself and understand the ways I've been operating and give them love instead of further blame, I'm also able to do that with others. As long as I cannot do that with myself, I can maybe do it in a certain way with other people, but never as deep as it's necessary for real change to happen. So I believe, and that sounds maybe a bit of fairy tale magic, but if we all could develop this self-compassion, this knowing that we're okay, that we are safe, that's actually the way to change the world.
No, I totally agree. And that we're good enough. Exactly.
It's this, I don't know, like I've described it to friends, like if you love someone very much, if it's your child, your partner, maybe it's even a dog, and then you see that person may be hurting themselves, and there is this feeling that has been coming up, and the only thing you wish that they could see themselves with your eyes, that no matter what you do, no matter how they look, no matter what, that they just see how perfectly beautiful they are. And that's it. That's what I wish we could all develop for ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's a lovely thing about, say, you mentioned a dog. Sometimes you see a dog, the way it will look at its owner or its human, and they don't judge them. They don't care. They just love them.
Yeah,
and they're loyal, and they're present and open and loving.
And you just see that like they don't care what a person is doing, which can be harmful at times, but that if we all have this pure love, this like a dog has. For me, a dog is a representation of pure love, unconditional love.
I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's an interesting question. How would you explain to a friend the benefits of the dialogue of self-liberation?
I would say that through the dialogue of self-liberation, you're getting more clarity or more awareness of your own thoughts. You're able to take back your power, and through that bring freedom and lightness to your life.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And finally, what would you say to someone who might be considering joining the Dialogue of Self-Liberation live program?
Do it. I would just say do it. It's like something it's here for life. It's here for life. And even if you take out of these 5 weeks, I cannot imagine that there is a person who will not take out at least one single thing that's helpful. And I've taken out a lot. So yeah, definitely just do it.
So I'd like to say a huge thank you once again for taking the time to do this today. It's really, really lovely to see you.
Likewise.
I do look forward to speaking with you more. I'm sure that we will, Steffi, over the coming years. And thank you very much for participating in the live program.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to.
You're most welcome.